Ladies, it is Madam Reed. Tonight's story begins with a dying man's last words. And they are not an apology. They are an instruction. Owen Caldwell, hooked to machines in a rain-soaked hospital room, looks at the woman who loved him for 20 years and tells her, with his final breath, not to compete with her sister. Not, I am sorry, I never chose you. Not, I should have believed you. Just, don't stand in Ivy's way again. Tessa Whitmore carries that sentence into a second life. She wakes up young again, with a college application glowing on her screen and a boy already racing to delete it. Not because he doesn't love her, but because his love has always come with a leash attached. He thought he was saving everyone. She was about to show him what it looks like when the person he never protected finally protects herself. Let's begin. The last time Owen Caldwell said Tessa Whitmore's name before he died, it was not to apologize. It was to tell her that, in the next life, she should stop fighting her sister. Only one wall lamp was on in the hospital room. His fist had twisted the white sheet into hard creases, and the green light from the monitor flickered over his bloodless face. Tessa stood by the bed in a black coat, still damp from the rain outside. She had not even taken off her gloves. Her fingertips were numb. Owen looked at her. His lips moved for a long time before he forced out one sentence. Tessa, if there is a next life, don't stand in Ivy's way again. A sweep of headlights slid across the window. Tessa's shadow stretched thin and long beside his bed. She had waited 20 years for him to say sorry. In the end, all he gave her was another verdict, in her last life. During senior year of high school, the Whitmore family found Ivy, the daughter who had been missing for 17 years. Ivy and Tessa were fraternal twins. One had grown up in a bright estate house. The other had grown up in other people's old trailers and damp basements. After Ivy came home, the Whitmore dinner table changed its menu, the living room changed its photographs, and even Marianne, their mother, changed the temperature of her voice. When she spoke to Ivy, she always sounded as if she were afraid of waking an injured bird. At first, Tessa had tried to approach Ivy carefully too. At midnight, she carried a pillow to Ivy's room and asked if she was afraid of the dark. She pressed her favorite cashmere blanket into Ivy's arms and told her that if she could not sleep, she could knock on the wall. Later, Owen began treating Ivy with the same careful gentleness. Tessa watched him bring Ivy the hot cocoa from Tessa's desk. She watched him skip Tessa's debate match to walk Ivy to the counseling office. She watched him step in front of the whispers in the school hallway and shield Ivy behind him. Aunts, she asked him, do you feel sorry for her, or are you in love with her? Owen laughed then and reached out to mess up her hair. Don't overthink it, Tessa. I will only ever be on your side. Then the only Eastbridge Honors recommendation slot at their private high school went to Tessa. Ivy did not get it. That night, she suffered a serious mental health crisis and was taken away by ambulance. When Owen stormed into the Whitmore house, his white shirt was wrinkled beyond recognition, and his eyes were webbed with red. He did not ask whether Tessa had been frightened. He grabbed her shoulders and shoved her against the wall. Why do you always have to take what belongs to her? Tessa's back hit a framed photograph. The glass shivered. Before she could speak, Owen's voice came crashing down. She finally came home. She finally has a little hope. You already have everything. Why can't you let her have this one thing? Later, for the sake of the two families' business ties, they were pushed together anyway. Engagement dinner. Wedding, a joint foundation, charity galas, perfect photographs. People called them the most well-matched couple on the East Coast. Only Tessa knew that whenever Owen stood beside her, his arm stayed half an inch away. They lived in the same house, but they were like two cracked glasses forced back together. However beautifully they were displayed, the edges still cut, until that rainy night in the hospital, until he was still telling her, on his deathbed, not to compete with Ivy. Tessa lowered her eyes to him. Her lashes did not tremble. Fine. The moment she said it, the heart monitor tore into a long, piercing tone. The next second, Tessa opened her eyes. There was no smell of disinfectant, no hospital bed, no cold light from a rainy night. Outside the window, it was a summer evening. Far away, fireworks for the private school's graduation season were being tested. A muffled boom sounded, and scattered sparks broke apart along the horizon. Her computer screen was glowing. Common App Portal. The cursor was sitting on the submit page. Tessa lowered her gaze and saw her own young hands. Her knuckles were clean, her nails rounded and neat. Around her wrist was the silver bracelet Owen had given her that year. At that moment, her bedroom door was shoved open. Owen Caldwell stood gripping the door frame. His chest rose and fell too fast. Sweat had dampened the hair across his forehead, and the collar of his gray shirt was open by one button. His eyes swept over the computer screen as if he had finally caught hold of something spinning out of control. Before Tessa moved, he rushed to the desk and snatched the mouse straight out of her hand. The cursor jerked wildly across the page. He opened the application list, found Eastbridge University, deleted the essay, cleared the recommendation information, and withdrew the draft submission. He moved so fast that he confirmed every pop-up without reading it. The screen went blank. Only then did Owen let out a breath. His shoulders slowly dropped. He turned to her. Tessa, Tessa sat in her chair and did not stand. Her hand was still on the desk. The fingertips he had knocked aside rested against the wood grain, and a chill crept upward inch by inch. Owen's throat worked, his voice lowered. This time, don't take Ivy's chance from her. She needs that program. She needs somewhere to start over. Another firework cracked outside the window. Tessa looked at him. Owen was so much younger than the man she remembered. His eyes still held that self-righteous light. He stood in her room like a hero who had run into a burning building to save someone, except the thing in his hand was her can of gasoline. The hospital room from their last life, the old resentment, that final sentence about not competing with Ivy, all of it was inside this young body. He had returned with his memories, and the first thing he did was not apologize to Tessa. It was not even to find out what had really happened with Ivy. He came to delete her application. When Owen saw that she was silent, he thought he had scared her. His tone softened a little. The East Coast has plenty of schools. You have never lived away from home. Why does it have to be Eastbridge, Tessa? You already have too much. Tessa's gaze moved away from his face and landed on the upper right corner of the screen. There was still a tiny browser tab there, shoved into the corner by his frantic clicking. Northlake University School of Journalism. Owen was still talking. Ivy is different. She lost 17 years. You cannot fight her for everything. Tessa reached out and gently took the mouse back. Owen frowned. What are you? She clicked the tab that had been buried in the corner. The page loaded, essay uploaded, recommendation letters confirmed, scholarship application complete. The destination was a northern city 1,000 miles away. Tessa checked it once. Her fingertip came to rest on the final submit button. Owen finally saw the name of the school. Northlake? Tessa clicked submit. The page spun for half a beat and displayed the confirmation message. Submitted. The room was so quiet that the sprinkler on the lawn outside could be heard turning in circles. Owen stared at the screen. A crack opened in that calm certainty that he had everything under control. When did you apply? Tessa turned the computer screen toward him. Before you came in, Owen pressed his lips into a thin line. You did that on purpose? Tessa pulled out a tissue and wiped his palm sweat off the mouse. Applied to college on purpose. She lifted her eyes, her gaze was flat. Yes, Owen's face shifted between pale and furious. He looked as if he had prepared an entire speech of accusations, only to realize he had walked onto the wrong set. He had burst in like a savior and deleted an empty shell of an application, while the real ship had already left the harbor. He took one step forward. Tessa, you can't go that far away. Tessa closed the laptop. You just said I shouldn't fight Ivy for everything. She stood. The chair legs scraped sharply against the floor. I heard you. Owen's fingers twitched, as if he wanted to grab her, then stopped in midair. Tessa, that is not what I meant. It is exactly what you meant. She stepped around him, walked to the closet, and took the school blazer from the back of the door. In the mirror, she saw Owen behind her, his brows tight with anger and with a more hidden kind of panic. In her last life, they had been tangled together for half a lifetime. Tessa knew that look too well. It was not regret. It was the look of a man realizing his chess piece had moved somewhere he had not allowed. Owen said in a low voice, Ivy will get into Eastbridge as long as you don't stand in her way. Tessa put on the blazer and removed the silver bracelet from her wrist. It was Owen's birthday gift to her inside. A line of words was engraved. Always on your side. She set the bracelet on the desk. The metal touched the wood with a soft click. Then I hope it goes well for her. Owen's eyes fell to the bracelet. The veins on the back of his hand slowly tightened. Marianne's voice came from downstairs. Tessa, Owen, dinner is almost ready. Ivy is doing well today, so please don't fight. Ivy, the name was like a key turning gently in the lock of the old house. In the last life, it had always been like this. Ivy needed quiet, so Tessa could not play piano. Ivy was allergic to seafood, so Tessa's birthday dinner became bland soup. Ivy was afraid of crowds, so Tessa's graduation party was canceled. Ivy was having a bad day, so Owen could not go to the movies with Tessa. No one ever snatched anything away loudly. Everything was carried out with soft hands, a chair today, a lamp tomorrow, until the whole room was empty and only Tessa stood there, being told to be understanding. Owen bent down and picked up the bracelet. Tessa, stop acting out. She turned to look at him. Owen, haven't you already chosen? In the dining room downstairs, the sound of cutlery paused for 1 second. Maybe someone had heard her. Owen stood there with the bracelet in his palm. That thin circle of silver looked like a piece of evidence returned far too late. He opened his mouth about to speak when Tessa's phone lit up. A new email appeared on the screen. Northlake University, subject application received. Tessa picked up her phone and walked past Owen toward the door. As she brushed by him, Owen reached out and caught her wrist. His grip was not heavy, but it was enough to stop her. Tessa, cancel the applications. She looked down at his hand. Then she peeled his fingers away, one by one. Her movements were slow and steady. In my last life, I canceled a lot of things. She pushed away his last finger. Movie tickets, internships, journalism school, flights that would have taken me away. She stepped out of the room. I am not canceling this. Downstairs, the lights were bright. The table was covered with dishes Ivy could eat. Marianne was coaxing her softly to drink more soup. Richard Whitmore was scrolling through his phone, frowning over messages about a foundation gala. Ivy sat by the window, her pale blonde hair loose over her shoulders. When she heard footsteps, she looked up, She saw Tessa. Her lips moved. Nor. Tessa did not stop. She passed the dining room and went straight to the foyer. Marianne set down her spoon. "Where are you going? Everyone is waiting for you to eat." Tessa picked up the car keys. School. Richard looked up. "At this hour," Tessa opened the door, "to make sure my future hasn't been deleted." The dining room fell dead silent just before the door closed. Owen chased her as far as the staircase, still clutching the silver bracelet. Ivy's eyes moved from his face to his palm, then slowly to the closed door. No one spoke. A few seconds later, Marianne broke the silence. "Owen, what is she upset about now?" Owen did not answer. He lowered his head and looked at the engraved words inside the bracelet. "Always on your side." The words were still there. But the person who wore them no longer wanted them. When Tessa drove out through the iron gates of the Whitmore estate, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from the school counselor. "Tessa, are you sure you don't want to attend tomorrow's recommendation confirmation dinner? The final Eastbridge program nominee will be formally announced." Tessa pulled over by the road and let her finger hover over the screen for 2 seconds. Then she replied, "I'll be there." After the message sent, she raised her eyes to the rearview mirror. Far behind her, the Whitmore house blazed with light, a beautiful glass box. She stepped on the gas again. Tomorrow night, the whole school would know that Ivy had received the Eastbridge recommendation. They would also know that Tessa Whitmore had applied to Northlake. And Owen Caldwell would stand in the crowd and hear her future read aloud for the first time. Not his last name, not Ivy's shadow, her own name. By the next evening, the Whitmore ballroom was packed with white roses and silver balloons. At the entrance stood a huge welcome sign. "Congratulations, Ivy Whitmore." When Tessa came downstairs, 2 housekeepers were hanging the last string of lights by the floor to ceiling windows. Crystal glasses lined the long table, and ice clinked inside them. Marianne stood in front of the flower wall, adjusting Ivy's skirt and gently smoothing the pale blonde curls over her shoulders. "Ivy, don't be nervous. Everyone tonight is family or close friends." Ivy lowered her eyes, pinching a small fold of fabric at her side. She was wearing a pale blue gown and a pearl necklace from Marianne's early collection. Tessa had borrowed that necklace once on her birthday, only for Marianne to take it back and say it was too formal, not right for a young girl. Now it lay quietly against Ivy's collarbone. Tessa had changed into a black slip dress with a crop jacket. Her hair was pinned up cleanly. She wore no jewelry. Her wrist was bare, missing the silver bracelet. Owen had arrived before her. He stood by the fireplace with a glass of water in his hand. When Ivy looked up at him, he said something quietly, and her shoulders slowly relaxed. Tessa walked down the last step. A few relatives noticed her first. "Tessa, you look beautiful tonight. I heard you have been busy with applications too. Both sisters leaving the nest this year. Richard and Marianne must be heartbroken." Marianne heard that and turned around. Her smile froze on her face for half a second. "Tessa has not decided where she is going yet. She has always had a mind of her own. There is no rush." Richard entered from the door with Helen Porter, the college counselor, beside him. Helen wore a gray suit and carried a tablet with a stack of schedule cards. When she saw Tessa, her eyes brightened. "Tessa, I got your confirmation. I am glad you are attending tonight." Marianne's hand stopped on Ivy's shoulder. "Confirming what?" Helen glanced down and tapped through her tablet. "Tonight is not only the Eastbridge recommendation confirmation. The school is also congratulating a few students who have already received early admission confirmation. Tessa is on that list as well." The air paused for a beat. Marianne looked at Tessa. "You got accepted?" Tessa took a glass of soda from a server's tray. Condensation clung to the glass and wet her fingertips. Last night, Richard's brows sank. Which school? Tessa was about to answer when Owen came over from the fireplace. Northlake. He said it quietly, but several relatives nearby heard him. Marianne's expression stiffened. That journalism school up north? Tessa nodded. Helen stepped in, smiling with genuine warmth. Its journalism program is excellent. Tessa's application was outstanding, especially her investigative piece on gaps in foster system records. The admissions office called me personally. Several relatives immediately turned toward Tessa. An investigative piece? Tessa, when did you write that? That girl really keeps things to herself. Richard set down his glass. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Tessa watched the bubbles rise in her soda. The house has been busy these past 2 days. Marianne opened her mouth, then closed it. Ivy lifted her head and looked at Tessa. Her fingers released the fabric of her skirt. She took one step forward. Tessa, congratulations. Her voice was not loud, but it slipped cleanly through the space between them. Tessa looked at her. Thank you. Owen's gaze moved back and forth between them. He set his glass on the table, and the base struck the wood with a dull sound. When dinner officially began, Tessa sat at the far end of the long table. Beside her was a red-haired girl, Maya Brooks, captain of the debate team, and one of the few people who dared to roll her eyes in front of Owen. Maya unfolded her napkin and lowered her voice. With this setup, anyone who didn't know better would think Ivy was being crowned Queen of the Shoreline. Tessa picked up her fork. Don't say that. Maya blinked. Fine. Pre-coronation tasting menu, then. Tessa almost choked on her water. Owen sat on Ivy's other side and looked over. Maya immediately put on an innocent smile and took a bite of bread. On the small stage, Richard began his speech. He said Ivy's return was the most precious gift the Whitmore family had ever received. He said she was strong and gentle, that she had lived through things she never should have had to endure, and still chose to believe in the world. He said the Eastbridge recommendation meant a new beginning for her. With every sentence, the guests nodded. Marianne lowered her head and dabbed at the corner of her eye. Ivy sat straight, her face a little pale. She had not touched the soup in front of her. Her fingertips pressed on the silver spoon so hard that the handle trembled. At last, Richard mentioned Tessa. Of course, Tessa has always been excellent as well. He paused for 2 seconds, as if he had found a note in the wrong folder. We are proud of her too. The applause was very polite. Maya leaned closer to Tessa and whispered, "Wow, a whole sentence and a half. Luxury." Tessa lifted her glass to her lips to hide the corner of her mouth. Helen stepped up to the stage and began announcing the school's recommendation results. She opened the projector. The big screen lit up and first played a short slideshow of Ivy's photos. The blank space of her childhood had been filled with new family pictures. At the beach, in the garden, in restaurants, outside the hospital. Every image was from after she came home. A line appeared at the bottom of the screen. Eastbridge University Honors Recommendation. Ivy Whitmore. Applause rose at once. Marianne stood to hug Ivy. Richard put an arm around Ivy's shoulders. Owen lowered his head and said to her, "You did it." But Ivy's eyes passed over the crowd and landed at the far end of the long table. Tessa clapped too. Her palms met each other in a quiet, precise rhythm. Maya did not clap. She was looking down at her phone, and her brows suddenly lifted. "Tessa." "Yay. I think the school sent the wrong file." On the stage, Helen was preparing to move to the next slide. She clicked the remote, and the screen went black for half a second. Then another email appeared on the wall in full. Congratulations, Tessa Whitmore, Northlake University School of Journalism. Below it were the scholarship confirmation and the signature from the admissions office. The room fell silent. For several seconds, the only sound was the low hum of the projector fan. Aunt was the first to react. She lifted her hands and began to clap. My God, Tessa, that is wonderful. This time the applause slowly rose from the corners of the room. First a few classmates, then relatives, and finally even a few trustees joined in. Helen looked down at her tablet. A flash of panic crossed her face. Then she smiled quickly. It seems the system announced this a little early for me. Tessa's admission absolutely deserves congratulations. She has received early confirmation from Northlake School of Journalism, along with a writing scholarship. Maya finally clapped, louder than everyone else. Queen behavior. Tessa nudged her lightly with her arm. Owen did not clap. He stood beside Ivy, his eyes fixed on the screen. On that email, Tessa's name was huge, the black letters clean and crisp. No one's last name followed it, not Caldwell. Marianne's smile, the one she had prepared for Ivy, was still on her face, but the corners of her mouth had turned stiff. Richard looked at Tessa. A scholarship. You did not tell us you applied for a scholarship. Tessa stood and placed her napkin beside her plate. There was a box on the application. I checked it. A relative laughed, trying to smooth things over. Richard, independence is a good thing. Richard did not answer. Marianne walked over quickly and lowered her voice. Tessa, tonight is Ivy's important night. Tessa looked at her. I did not touch the projector. Helen immediately explained from the stage. This was my mistake. Tessa's section was already part of tonight's program. The order simply got mixed up. Marianne's face tightened further. Suddenly, Ivy came over. She lifted her skirt and hurried forward, stopping 2 steps from Tessa. This is not Tessa's fault. She spoke too quickly, her voice trembling faintly. Ivy, Marianne reached out to steady her. It is all right. Mom knows you are kind. Ivy avoided her hand. I am not defending her. She deserved to be congratulated. The table went quiet again. Tessa saw Ivy's fingers pinch her skirt again, tighter this time, until her knuckles turned white. Owen walked over and stood behind Ivy. Ivy, don't get worked up. Ivy turned and looked at him. I am not worked up. Owen's hand froze in the air. Behind Tessa, Maya murmured. This dinner finally became worth the ticket price. Tessa did not turn around. Richard called the staff over and told them to continue the program. The music started again. Servers brought out dessert. Guests began whispering to one another. But the dinner had already changed flavor. The email had been cut from the screen, but its afterimage remained in everyone's eyes. When Tessa went out to the terrace for air, footsteps followed behind her. She did not need to look back to know who it was. Owen closed the glass door, and the music outside became a muffled layer. He stood behind her with his hands in his pockets, his voice low. Are you satisfied now? Tessa looked at the light strips on the far lawn. Satisfied with what? Making everyone watch Ivy be humiliated. Tessa turned around. The terrace lights fell over Owen's face. His jaw was tight, and that fire in his eyes had started burning again. Tessa set her glass on the railing. I applied to college. Helen loaded the wrong file. Ivy said one sentence for me. Which part did I arrange? Owen stepped closer. You knew how important tonight was for her. I got accepted too. You could have said it tomorrow. Tessa nodded. Of course, my life should always be scheduled around Ivy's calendar. Owen's brows drew together. Tessa. She picked up her glass and walked past him. As they brushed shoulders, she paused. Wasn't that exactly what you thought when you deleted my application last night? Owen's fingers curled tight. The glass door opened from inside, and Ivy stood there. Under the lights, her makeup looked very pale, but her eyes were visibly red. Tessa, I want to talk to you. Owen turned at once. Ivy, go back inside first. Ivy did not look at him. She only looked at Tessa, just a few minutes. Tessa did not answer immediately. Inside the ballroom, Marianne was looking around for Ivy. Richard was surrounded by several trustees, maintaining a courteous smile through the glass. Maya mouthed one word at Tessa Rune. Tessa placed her glass back on a server's tray. Tomorrow. Ivy took a step forward. I am afraid tomorrow will be too late. As soon as she said it, a stir broke out on the other side of the ballroom. Someone passed their phone to the person beside them. Maya pushed open the glass door and rushed out. The humor had vanished from her face. Tessa, you need to see this. She handed over her phone. On the screen was a new post from the school's anonymous gossip account. Whitmore twin drama just got uglier. The picture was the projected admission email. The headline beneath it glared sharply. Did Tessa Whitmore steal the spotlight from her lost sister again? Tessa stared at the line. Her fingertips paused on the edge of the phone. Owen saw it too. His first reaction was not to look at Ivy. It was to look at Tessa. The glance was quick, but Tessa did not miss it. Like a judge lifting the gavel before a retrial had even begun. Ivy reached for the phone, but her hand shook, and she failed to hold it. The phone slipped from her fingers and hit the stone terrace, cracking the screen with one thin line. Inside the ballroom, Marianne finally found them. Ivy, what happened? No one answered. Tessa bent down and picked up the phone. The screen was still lit, and comments were climbing one after another. Samane said Tessa had loved stealing Ivy's things since childhood. Samane said Owen had stood beside Ivy all night. So the answer was obvious. Samane's posted a blurry photo. In the photo, Tessa and Owen were standing on the terrace. The angle was suggestive, making it look as if she had pulled Owen aside alone during her sister's celebration dinner. Tessa returned the phone to Maya. Then she looked up and saw that Ivy's face had drained completely white. Owen reached out to steady Ivy, and his voice went cold. Tessa, did you do this? The wind moved across the terrace, lifting a loose strand of hair from Tessa's forehead. She looked at Owen and suddenly smiled. It was not a laugh, only the faintest movement at the corner of her mouth. That was fast. Owen's eyes darkened. Tessa looked past him to Ivy. If you still want to talk tomorrow, come to the back garden. She picked up her coat and pushed the door open, returning to the ballroom. Behind her, the anonymous post was still gathering comments like a live wire. As Tessa moved through the crowd, she heard people whispering her name. She did not stop. The mirror by the staircase reflected her profile: black dress, pale shoulder, empty wrist. Before she went upstairs, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. You think leaving Eastbridge means you can give Ivy her things back? Tessa looked at it for 2 seconds and saved a screenshot of the number. Then she opened her photos and created a new folder. It had one word for a name: evidence. Early the next morning, the back garden was still wet from rain, and the stone path by the pond shone slickly. When Tessa arrived, Ivy was already standing there. She wore a white knit cardigan, and her face looked worse than it had the night before. When she heard footsteps, she turned back and opened her mouth. Tessa, I really never wanted to take your things. Tessa stopped 3 steps away. Under the eaves, the security camera blinked with a tiny red light. The pond surface trembled. Ivy took 1 step forward, her shoe landing on slick moss. Tessa, I just wanted to tell you that Post wasn't me." Before she finished, her body suddenly tipped sideways. Tessa's hand was already reaching out. The next second, urgent footsteps sounded behind her. Owen's voice split the rain-washed air. "Ivy!" By the time Owen shouted, Tessa had already caught Ivy's sleeve. The white knit fabric was wet and slippery in her palm, too thin to hold with any real strength. Ivy's shoe slid across the moss, and her body fell toward the pond, one shoulder already hanging over the water. Tessa stepped forward. Her heels sank into the mud. She reached out with her other hand. Just as her fingers touched Ivy's wrist, a force slammed into her shoulder from behind. Owen rushed in and knocked her aside. The fabric in Tessa's hand slipped free. Water exploded upward. Ivy fell into the pond, her pale blue skirt spreading across the surface like a flower crushed in someone's fist. Tessa staggered to the side. Her lower back struck the edge of a stone table, and her palm landed on a shard from a broken flower pot. Sharp pain stabbed through her hand. Her fingers curled by instinct, and beads of blood rose at once, dripping down with the rainwater. Owen did not look at her. He jumped straight into the shallow water, grabbed Ivy's arm, and carried her back to the bank. The pond was not deep, the water only reaching his waist, but Ivy seemed frozen with fright. She collapsed in his arms, her face nearly transparent. "Tessa." Marianne's voice came from the terrace. She lifted her skirt and rushed down the steps. Richard followed behind her. Housekeepers and several guests who had not left yet poured out through the glass doors. Maya was the last to run out, still gripping her phone, her hair blown into chaos by the wind. Owen set Ivy on the grass and took off his jacket to cover her drenched shoulders. "Ivy, look at me." Ivy coughed several times, her lashes clumped together with water, and her half-open eyes had no focus. Marianne knelt beside her, reaching for her face with shaking hands. "Sweetheart, can you hear me?" Richard looked up at Tessa. His gaze was heavy. Tessa stood by the pond. Her left hand hung at her side, blood dripping from her fingertips onto the stone path. Muddy water had splashed across her black dress. The shoulder Owen had hit was slowly going numb. Owen turned around. He was dripping wet, his shirt plastered to his body, and the anger in his eyes was colder than the pond water. "What the hell were you trying to do?" Tessa looked at him and said nothing. Owen stepped closer. "She defended you last night. She was afraid you would be misunderstood, so she came to explain everything to you first thing this morning. This is how you repay her." Maya frowned. "Wait, you didn't even see." "I saw her grabbing Ivy." Owen cut her off, his eyes still locked on Tessa. "I saw Ivy fall." Maya pointed at the slick stone by the pond. She was trying to pull her back. Owen let out a cold laugh. "You always take her side." Maya's face darkened at once. "I take the side of people with working eyes." Marianne lifted her head, her eyes red. "Tessa, your sister is afraid of water." Tessa's throat moved. Marianne's hand was still pressed against Ivy's back, and her voice shook. "You knew she was afraid of water." The wind moved through the garden, carrying the smell of wet grass. Tessa's palm was still bleeding. She hid the injured hand at her side, her fingertips brushing the seam of her dress. "I didn't push her." No one answered. Richard handed his phone to a housekeeper and told her to call the family doctor. Then he looked at Tessa. "Go inside first." He said go inside first. But it was not concern. It was quarantine. As if he were removing something inappropriate from the scene. Owen lifted Ivy in his arms. When he passed Tessa, he paused. Water still dripped from his shoulders, one drop after another onto the stone, mixing with the blood from Tessa's palm. "If anything happens to her," he said, "I won't clean up your mess again." Tessa lifted her eyes to him. "When have you ever cleaned up anything for me?" Owen's jaw tightened in his arms. Ivy moved and made a faint, blurred sound. "Tessa," Marianne immediately leaned closer. "Ivy, don't talk. The doctor is coming." Ivy's hand slipped out from under the jacket, wet and suspended in the air, as if she were trying to reach for something. Tessa saw it, but she did not move toward her. Owen saw it too. He lowered his head and said softly, "She is here. Don't be scared." Ivy's fingers stiffened. Tessa stood where she was. Pain climbed from her lower back all the way to her shoulders and neck. She raised her head and looked toward the eaves. The security camera was fixed at the upper right corner of the terrace. Under its black dome, the red light blinked steadily. The air after the rain was too clear. That red dot shone like a tiny eye. Maya followed her gaze, and the corner of her mouth slowly pressed flat. It recorded everything. Tessa did not answer. Maya lowered her voice. "Are you going to make them watch it now?" Tessa looked down at her palm. The shard was still stuck in her skin, its white edge barely visible. She pinched it with her right hand and pulled it out carefully. Blood immediately welled faster. Maya sucked in a breath. Tessa put the shard into her coat pocket, then took a napkin from the nearby long table and pressed it against the wound. "If we show them now, they will say the angle is unclear." Maya clenched her jaw. "Then zoom in. They will say Ivy was scared and can't remember clearly. Then let Ivy say it herself." Tessa raised her head and looked at Ivy, who had been carried inside by Owen. Behind the glass door, Marianne was circling Ivy. Richard was on the phone. Owen stood beside the sofa, his whole body like a soaked wall. Tessa withdrew her gaze. "Even if she says it, they won't believe her." Maya opened her mouth, but no curse came out. She only gripped her phone tighter. A few minutes later, the anonymous account updated. Maya's phone buzzed 3 times in a row. She opened it, took one look, and her face changed. Tessa. On the screen was a photo that had just been taken. In the photo, Ivy had collapsed in Owen's arms, while Tessa stood by the pond, her black dress muddy and her left hand hidden behind her back. The angle was vicious. It only captured her standing there with a cold face. It did not show her bleeding, and it did not show the instant Owen knocked her away. A line sat beneath the headline. Ivy Whitmore pulled from family pond after private talk with Tessa. The comments came faster than last night. She really did it. Owen was there. If Tessa were innocent, he wouldn't look that furious. Poor Ivy. Imagine surviving everything just to come home to this. Maya shut off the phone. "Who is taking photos in your family garden?" Tessa looked toward the second-floor terrace, then toward the small path beside the bushes leading to the side gate. Plenty of outsiders had stayed after last night's dinner to help clean up. School staff, florists, photographers, temporary kitchen workers. The Whitmore house was too large and had too many doors. Anyone could have lifted a phone in the confusion. She said nothing. She turned and walked toward the house. Maya followed. "Where are you going?" "To wash my hand." In the living room, Ivy had been wrapped in a dry blanket and placed on the sofa. Her face looked a little better than before, but her lips were still trembling. Marianne brought hot tea to her hands, while Richard stood by the floor-to-ceiling window speaking with the family doctor. The moment Owen saw Tessa come in, his eyes went cold. "Why are you still here?" Tessa walked straight toward the stairs. Marianne's voice chased after her. "Tessa, stop." Tessa stopped. Marianne set the tea down and walked over quickly. Her hand reached halfway out, then seemed to remember there were still outsiders in the room. She forced it to stop and grabbed her own wrist instead. Your sister has been speaking up for you since last. She was afraid we would misunderstand you, afraid you would be hurt, afraid you would think everyone had taken her side. Tessa turned around. Marianne's eyes were red, and a few strands of hair had fallen loose. Why can't you be a little kinder to her? Tessa looked at her. After a few seconds, she removed the napkin pressed to her palm. Blood had soaked through the white cloth. Marianne's voice stopped. Maya said from the side, "She fell. Owen hit her." Owen looked up. "I was saving Ivy." Tessa nodded. "Yes." She pressed the napkin back to her wound. "You saved her." After that sentence, the air in the living room went rigid. Owen looked at her, his brows drawn so tightly they looked ready to split. Richard finally ended the call. "The doctor will be here in 15 minutes. He glanced at Tessa's hand. "Have him look at you too." Tessa did not answer. She turned and went upstairs. Maya followed her to the staircase and was stopped briefly by a housekeeper. She went around her without hesitation and followed Tessa to the second floor. After the bedroom door closed, the sounds downstairs were cut off. Tessa walked into the bathroom and turned on the faucet. Cold water ran over her palm and thin red threads spiraled into the white sink. She picked out the remaining tiny fragments with steady movements. Maya stood in the doorway, watched for 2 seconds, then could not help turning her face away. "You really aren't going to release the security footage now?" Tessa turned off the water. "Not yet. If you wait any longer, they will turn you into the family edition of a true crime documentary." Tessa took out the first aid kit and pressed antiseptic cotton to the wound. Maya watched her. "You have something else, don't you?" Tessa did not answer. With one hand, she picked up her phone and opened the evidence folder she had created last night. There were 3 screenshots inside. The anonymous account post, the text from the unknown number, the secret photo by the pond. She opened the household security app. The page required administrator access. The account belonged to Richard. Tessa tried her own family email. The screen told her she had no permission. She looked at that line and suddenly smiled. Maya raised an eyebrow. "I know that smile. Someone is about to have a very bad day." Tessa set the phone on the table, opened a drawer, and took out an old key. Maya looked at it. "What is that?" "The backup key to the house manager's office." "You stole it." "When I was little and got lost. The house manager gave it to me. He told me to sit in his office if I couldn't find anyone." Tessa put the key in her pocket and picked up her coat. Maya paused for 2 seconds. "You are going downstairs now?" "Not downstairs." Tessa opened the bedroom door. "I am going to get my footage." The hallway was empty. Downstairs, the living room was still busy, and everyone's attention was wrapped around Ivy. Tessa took the side stairs to the rear corridor on the first floor, avoiding the main living room and walking through a passage lined with old framed photographs. The wall held years of Whitmore family pictures. A small Tessa sitting on the garden swing while Owen stood behind her and pushed. Tessa holding a debate trophy while Marianne kissed her forehead. Tessa and Richard fishing by the lake, both of them sunburned and smiling. Farther on, the photos changed. The day Ivy came home. Ivy's first family dinner. Ivy and Marianne in the greenhouse. Ivy and Owen outside the hospital. Tessa walked past the photo wall without slowing. The house manager's office was at the end of the back corridor. She opened the door with the key. Inside, only a green desk lamp was on. The security server sat in a cabinet, and next to it was a sticky note listing camera numbers for each area. Maya closed the door behind them and whispered, "You even know this?" Tessa pulled out the chair and sat down. It broke once in my last life. Richard asked me to call a technician. She did not explain further. The screen lit up and showed a password entry page. Maya folded her arms. Do you have the password? Tessa pressed several numbers. Her mother's birthday wrong, her father's birthday wrong. The date Ivy came home correct. For 1 second, Maya's expression was spectacular. Tessa said nothing. She opened the back garden camera and rewound 10 minutes. The footage appeared. A gray morning, slick stone tiles, Ivy standing by the pond. Tessa walking over, the two of them speaking a few steps apart. Ivy stepping forward, her shoe slipping. Tessa reaching out and catching her sleeve. Right after that, Owen rushed in from the left side of the screen. He knocked Tessa away. Ivy fell into the water. Tessa fell toward the flower pot. The whole thing was perfectly clear. No blind spot, no misunderstanding. Maya's breath softened. Copy it. Tessa plugged in the spare drive from the office drawer. The progress bar moved slowly forward, 20%. Footsteps sounded in the corridor outside. Maya immediately turned off the desk lamp, plunging the office into darkness. The footsteps stopped outside the door. Someone tried the handle, locked. Richard's voice came from outside. Paul, are you in there? Tessa stared at the progress bar. 51%. Maya held her breath, her hand already reaching for the paper cutter nearby. Outside the door, Richard tried the handle again. Strange. Another voice sounded Owen. Richard, Tessa isn't in her room. Maya swore silently. The progress bar jumped to 79%. Owen's voice came close. She went upstairs earlier. Maya is gone too. Richard paused for 2 seconds. You think she would come here? She looked at the camera. Tessa's fingers stilled on the mouse. 92%. A ring of keys jingled outside the door. Maya turned to Tessa, her mouth forming the words clearly. Hurry up, 98%. The key slid into the lock. 100%, Tessa pulled out the drive and slipped it into the inner pocket of her coat. The door opened. Light from the hallway spilled in. Richard stood in the doorway with Owen behind him. Both of their eyes landed on Tessa at the same time. Tessa sat in the chair, her injured hand wrapped in rough gauze, her other hand still beside the mouse. Richard's face darkened. Tessa, what are you doing in here? Tessa stood and pushed the chair back into place, looking for the truth. Owen stepped past Richard and strode into the office, his eyes sweeping over the security monitor. Only the main menu remained on the screen. He turned back to her. Did you copy the video? Tessa did not answer. Owen held out his hand. Give it to me. Maya stepped in front of Tessa. You already knocked her down once today. Try it again. Richard snapped in a low voice. Eno. Tessa looked at her father. Do you want to watch it? Richard frowned. Ivy needs quiet right now. Tessa nodded. So no. She walked past Owen. Owen reached out to stop her. Tessa, she paused. Her gaze falling to his hand. Owen's hand hovered for 1 second. In the end, he did not touch her. Tessa walked past him. The lights in the hallway were bright. Her shadow fell over the photo wall, overlapping with those old pictures one by one, then separating from them one by one. Downstairs, Ivy sat on the sofa, looking up at the staircase. When she saw Tessa, she immediately stood, and the blanket slipped from her shoulders. Tessa, Marianne steadied her. Ivy, don't move around. Ivy's eyes stayed fixed on Tessa. I didn't. Owen came down behind Tessa and interrupted her. Ivy, rest first. Ivy's lips trembled. Tessa did not stop. She walked to the foyer and picked up the car keys. Marianne's voice sharpened. "Where are you going now?" Tessa opened the door. "Somewhere that won't cut me out of footage where I was trying to save someone." Maya followed her out when she passed Owen. She paused for half a second. "Friendly reminder, Caldwell, you are on camera." Owen's face finally changed, the door shut. Outside, rain was falling again, thin and cold. Tessa walked down the steps, and rain soaked the gauze on her palm. She opened the car door, placed the drive in her inner pocket, and switched her phone to airplane mode. Maya got into the passenger seat. Where to? Tessa started the car school. For what? The windshield wipers swept across the glass ahead. Street lights lit up one after another. Tessa looked forward. The anonymous account likes posting things, doesn't it? Maya slowly turned her head. Tessa drove through the iron gates of the Whitmore estate. Then it can wait for the real video. By the time Tessa parked outside the school's journalism building, Owen's 19th missed call had appeared on her phone. The wipers stopped, and water trails crawled slowly down the windshield. The private school was very quiet at night. Only a few corridor lights remained in the main building, like a row of eyes that had not quite woken up. Maya unbuckled her seatbelt and looked down at Tessa's phone. 9:18, congratulations. Prince Caldwell has discovered he might not be the center of the universe. Tessa silenced the phone and put it in her pocket. The side door of the journalism building had an old electronic lock. Tessa entered the code, and the door clicked open. Maya followed her into the empty hallway. "Why do you have the journalism building code?" Tessa pushed open the door to the school paper office. "I am the editor-in-chief. Wright almost forgot. Besides being the heroine of a rich family scandal, you are also the only person in this school who knows how to check records. Old newspapers, camera equipment, and half-finished coffees cluttered the office. Several articles Tessa had written were pinned to the wall. The cafeteria purchasing black hole, the delayed scholarship list from the board, missing foster system records. The headlines were not flashy, but the evidence was arranged piece by piece, clean and undeniable. Tessa opened a computer and inserted the drive. The folder popped up. Back garden footage. She did not play it. She copied, uploaded, and backed it up. One copy went to cloud storage, one to her own email, and one to Helen Porter with a short subject line. Backyard footage, timestamped. Please keep a copy. Maya sat on the desk and watched the progress bar move. You are not sending it to the bell tower. Tessa hit the final enter key. Maya's brows lifted. No, that line in the car made it sound like you were about to blow the roof off the place. Tessa pulled out the drive and wiped the water from it with a tissue. The anonymous account wants drama. She placed the drive into a brown paper envelope. I give evidence. Maya leaned against the desk, the corner of her mouth slowly curving. Put that on your campaign poster. Although you would never run, because you would investigate every candidate's tax records first. Tessa opened a drawer, found a roll of tape, and sealed the envelope. Footsteps sounded at the door. Helen Porter stood under the hallway light in a trench coat, her hair still not fully dry. She had clearly rushed over. She held a phone in her hand, the screen still showing the email Tessa had sent. Tessa. Tessa stood. Helen's gaze landed on the gauze around her hand. What happened to your hand? Maya answered immediately. She failed to save someone because a self-appointed savior slammed her out of the way. Helen looked at Tessa. Tessa handed her the envelope. The video is inside, original file, no edits. Helen did not take it right away. She looked at Tessa for several seconds, then reached for the envelope and placed it in her handbag. What do you want me to do with it? Tessa opened the video on the computer and dragged it to the key timestamp on the screen. Ivy slipped. Tessa reached out, and Owen rushed in and knocked her away. Helen's face sank inch by inch. She watched it once, then rewound and watched it again. Maya folded her arms. Everyone is saying Tessa pushed her. Helen closed the computer. Tomorrow morning, I will give the video to the headmaster and both families. The school will also deal with the anonymous account. Tessa nodded. Thank you. Helen stared at her hand. Are you going home tonight? Tessa did not speak. Helen got her answer from the silence. Are you 18 yet, next month? Helen's brows tightened faintly. Maya said at once, She can stay at my place. My mom is on the night shift, my dad is on a business trip, and the only other resident is a cat who has lost faith in humanity. Tessa glanced at her. Maya spread her hands. The cat is easier to deal with than certain people in your house. Helen took out a sticky note and wrote down a number. This is the student support hotline the school works with. You can call even if it is not an emergency tonight. Go to Maya's, your wound needs proper care. Don't tough it out alone. Tessa took the note, folded it, and put it in her pocket. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Marianne. Come home, Ivy is terrified because of you. You should at least explain yourself to her. Another message followed immediately. Do not make this any uglier. Maya leaned over, took one look, and sneered. It is ugly, but not because of you. Does the Whitmore house own mirrors? Tessa did not reply. She turned her phone face down on the desk, shut down the computer, and pushed the chair back into place. One movement followed another without pause. When they left the school, the rain had lightened. Maya got into the passenger seat and had just closed the door when Tessa's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. Tessa opened it. You think getting the video means you won. You can't walk out of that family, and you can't walk out of Owen's life. A photo followed beneath it. It was taken from the terrace during last night's dinner. In the photo, Tessa had her back to the camera, and Owen stood in front of her with only half a step between them. Whoever took it had clearly been hiding behind the flower wall. Maya's face went completely cold. This wasn't some random classmate. This person was inside your house last night. Tessa took a screenshot and saved it to the evidence folder. Then she blocked the unknown number too. Maya looked at her. Where are you going now? Tessa started the car. Home. Maya's eyes widened. Didn't you just promise Helen you would go to my house? I need my documents. Have someone send them out. Tessa Whitmore's things have never needed anyone's permission to leave. Maya shut her mouth for 2 seconds. Fine, that line works. Drive, I am ready to witness luxury moving day. By the time the car returned to the Whitmore house, it was nearly midnight. The gate was unlocked, and the lights by the entrance were all on. Shadows moved in the living room. Marianne sat on the sofa. Ivy was wrapped in a blanket. Richard stood by the fireplace, and Owen leaned near the window. Everyone looked as if they had been waiting for her. Tessa pushed the door open and stepped inside. Cold, wet air came in with her. Marianne immediately stood. You finally came back. Tessa did not stop. She headed straight for the stairs. Richard spoke. Tessa, sit down. We need to talk. I need to get my things first. Owen moved away from the window. What things? Tessa finally stopped and turned to look at him. My things. Owen stared at her, as if trying to find some familiar panic on her face. There was none. She stood under the light, the hem of her black dress still stained with garden mud. Rough gauze wrapped around her hand, her eyes frighteningly clear. Ivy suddenly stood. Tessa, I told them you didn't push me. Marianne held her back. Ivy, the doctor told you to rest. Ivy struggled once but could not break free. She could only look at Tessa. I really told them. Tessa looked at her and gave one small nod. I know. Those 3 words instantly reddened Ivy's eyes. Owen's brows lowered. Since, she explained for you, you should stay and clear this up. Tessa lifted her foot and went upstairs. Owen followed 2 steps. Maya blocked him directly. Family meeting paused. The heroine is packing. Owen looked at her. This is not your family business. Maya smiled faintly. Great, because this family business smells like a flooded basement, and I have no interest in claiming it. Tessa went upstairs, returned to her room, and opened her suitcase. She did not rummage. Passport, copy of her birth certificate, admission documents, bank cards, a few clothes, her laptop, school newspaper files. Every item went into its proper place. On the desk still lay the silver bracelet Owen had given her. Beside it was a small jewelry box. Inside was an engagement ring. It was the ring Owen had placed on her finger at their engagement party in her last life. In this life, they were not officially engaged yet, but both families had long treated it as the default arrangement. Marianne had even had the jeweler send over the size in advance. Tessa had tried it on a few days ago. It fit perfectly. So perfectly, it felt as if someone had already measured exactly how long she was meant to be trapped. She picked up the ring and walked to the window. Downstairs, the terrace lights were on, and the pond surface still trembled. She could see the security camera, its red dot blinking. Tessa placed the ring on the windowsill. Then she took a sticky note from the pen cup. She did not write a long message, only one line. You were right. No one has to choose me forever. Starting tonight, that includes me. After writing it, she weighed the note down beneath the ring. A soft knock came at the door. Not Owen Ivy. Tessa did not speak. Ivy opened the door a crack on her own and stood outside, holding a clean scarf. Can I come in? Tessa zipped up her suitcase. Number Ivy's fingers tightened. Okay, she did not force her way inside. She only placed the scarf on the floor by the door. It is cold outside. Tessa glanced at the scarf. It was white and very soft. She had bought it last winter. Later, Marianne said Ivy was afraid of the cold and took it to give to her. Now it had come back. Ivy lowered her head. I didn't post that thing. I don't know who did. What I wanted to tell you yesterday was that I don't want the Eastbridge recommendation. Tessa's hand stopped on the handle of the suitcase. Ivy's voice was very soft. I wrote to Helen. I told her you were more suited for it. I told her not to give me special treatment because of my story. The hallway light fell across her shoulders. She looked so thin she seemed almost transparent. But Mom and Dad don't know. Owen doesn't know either. Tessa looked at her. Why didn't you tell them directly? Ivy's lips moved. I did. She raised her head, water shone in her eyes, but it did not fall. They said I was too kind. The room went quiet. Richard's voice came from downstairs, apparently asking Owen where Tessa was. Civvy took one step back. Go, Tessa lifted the suitcase handle. The wheels rolled over the carpet without a sound. She walked to the door, bent down, picked up the scarf, and handed it back to Ivy. Ivy did not take it. Tessa, it is yours. Tessa looked at her hands, pale from the cold. Use it for now. Ivy's tears finally fell, landing on the edge of the scarf and spreading into one small wet spot. Tessa did not look at her again. She dragged her suitcase downstairs. The conversation in the living room cut off instantly. Marianne saw the suitcase, and her face changed. What are you doing? Leaving. Richard set his glass on the table. Now is not the time for drama. Tessa walked to the foyer and picked up her coat. I am perfectly clear-headed. Owen came quickly and blocked the door. Tessa, You cannot leave tonight. Behind her, Maya gave a tiny whistle. That sounds healthy. Owen ignored her. He looked at Tessa, his voice lowered. You got the video, didn't you? Marianne's head snapped toward him. What video? Owen's eyes shifted. Tessa saw it. He had not forgotten that he knocked her aside. He had only hoped no one would know. Richard's expression changed too. Tessa, hand over the video. Family matters do not need to go outside. Tessa looked at her father. When the whole internet was tearing me apart, it was a family matter. She stood her suitcase upright. When I found evidence, suddenly it became outside business. Richard's voice sank. Watch your attitude. Tessa nodded. I will. She took out her phone and opened a rideshare app. Owen reached for it. Maya was faster. She caught his wrist in one hand. Try touching her phone. Owen shook Maya off, his face ugly. Ivy stood on the second floor, holding the stair rail. Suddenly, she spoke. Let her go. Marianne looked up. Ivy, you don't understand. I do. Ivy's voice shook. But it did not break. You don't listen to her, and you don't listen to me. At least let her go. Marianne looked as if something had pierced her. She stood still and did not move. Headlights swept across the door outside. Tessa opened the door. Owen finally took one panicked step. Tessa, let's talk tomorrow. Tonight is too messy. Tessa looked back at him. You didn't wait until tomorrow when you deleted my application last night. Owen's face went half a shade paler. Tessa walked out, and Maya followed. The driver helped place her suitcase in the trunk. Before the car door closed, Owen chased down the steps. Rain fell on his shoulders. Shaitsa. She did not roll down the window. The car slowly pulled away from the gate. The lights of the Whitmore house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Tessa leaned against the seat. The gauze on her hand was soaked with rain, and the edge was stained pale red. Maya dug a piece of chocolate from her bag and pressed it into Tessa's hand. Eat breakup, moving out. Family war. Low blood sugar will sabotage performance. Tessa looked at the chocolate, unwrapped it, and took a bite. It was sweet enough to taste bitter. 10 minutes later, Owen rushed into Tessa's room. The window was half open. Rain blew inside, and the curtains moved gently. There was no laptop on the desk, no application materials, and no silver bracelet. Only one ring on the windowsill, weighing down a sticky note. Owen reached out and picked up the ring. The wind lifted one corner of the note. After he read the line, he stood there for a very long time without moving. Downstairs, a housekeeper hurried into the living room with an old jewelry box and the silver bracelet. Mr. Caldwell, this was found in Miss Tessa's room. Owen did not take it. Marianne lowered herself onto the sofa, gripping the armrest. Richard looked down at his phone. A new email had just appeared on the screen. From Helen Porter. The subject was, backyard footage review required. Ivy stood on the staircase, her eyes red, the white scarf clenched in her hands. The house was so quiet they could hear rain striking the windows, and Tessa's car was already on the highway to the airport. The airport waiting hall was lit with a whiteness that had no warmth. Tessa sat by the window with her suitcase standing beside her legs. The gauze on her hand had already been changed once. Maya had bought antiseptic pads, bandages, and a hot drink from a convenience store, and now she crouched in front of Tessa, rewrapping the wound. Your Prince's Hero complex comes with some serious upper body strength. Tessa looked at the cut across her palm. The shard had not cut deeply, but the edges were messy. The skin had been soaked by rain and was an angry red. When Maya touched it with a cotton swab, Tessa's fingertips curled slightly. Maya looked up. Say something if it hurts. Tessa placed the hot drink on her lap. Will you be gentler? Number Maya lowered her head and continued wrapping the gauze. But I can insult Owen to distract you. Tessa finally smiled. A boarding announcement came over the speakers. The flight to the northern city had 40 minutes left. She opened her phone. The instant she turned off airplane mode, messages flooded in like a tide. Owen's missed calls, voice messages from Marianne, texts from Richard, screenshots from classmates. The anonymous account had updated again. This time, the headline was sharper. Sources say Tessa Whitmore left home after pond incident. The attached photo showed her dragging her suitcase out of the Whitmore house. The comment section was hot enough to look doused in oil. She ran. If she did nothing wrong, why leave in the middle of the night? Owen chased her out, and she didn't even look back. Ice cold. Does anyone remember she got into Northlake last night? Maybe she is just going to school. Stop defending her. Her sister just fell into a pond. After reading, Maya raised her hand and turned off the phone screen. I really want to drop the video right now. Tessa took back the phone. No need. Those 2 words are going to kill me one day. Tessa opened her email. Helen had not replied yet. She set the phone aside and looked out the window. A plane rolled across the runway, its wing light flashing once in the rain. Meanwhile, in the Whitmore living room, Helen Porter placed her laptop on the coffee table. She did not sit. Her black trench coat was still wet from the rain, and her handbag rested by her feet. Her expression was colder than it ever looked at school. Richard stood by the fireplace. Marianne sat on the sofa, twisting a tissue in her hands. Ivy sat in the armchair, wrapped in the white scarf, her eyes fixed on Helen's computer. Owen stood by the window and did not come closer. The ring was still in his hand. Before Helen opened the video, she looked at everyone in the room. I will say this once. This file is original security footage, unedited. The timestamp is intact, and the image comes from the back garden security camera. Richard lifted a hand and pressed his brow. It isn't that we don't believe Tessa. Ivy looked up at him. Richard stopped speaking. Helen did not indulge that pretty sentence. She clicked play. The footage lit up. The back garden after rain appeared on the screen. Tessa entered from the left side of the frame. Black dress, coat, steady steps. Ivy stood by the pond, her hand gripping the sleeve of her white knit cardigan. 3 steps separated them. There was no sound. Marianne's fingers clenched around the tissue, on the screen. Ivy took 1 step forward and slipped. Her body tilted backward. Tessa reached out almost immediately and caught her sleeve. Ivy's shoulder was pulled back 1/2 inch. The next second, Owen rushed in from the edge of the frame. His shoulder slammed hard into Tessa. Tessa was knocked away. The sleeve slipped from her hand, and Ivy fell into the pond. Tessa stumbled backward, fell beside the shattered flower pot, and pressed her hand into the ceramic shards. No one in the living room spoke. Only the video kept playing on the screen. Owen jumped in to save Ivy. Marianne and Richard rushed out. Everyone gathered around Ivy. Tessa slowly sat up from the ground. She looked down at her own hand and hid the blood against the side of her dress. On screen, Marianne stood in front of her and said something. The video had no audio, but everyone remembered that sentence. You knew she was afraid of water. Marianne's lips trembled. Helen dragged the progress bar back. She played it again. Tessa reached out. Ivy fell in. Tessa fell. Helen said nothing. On the 3rd replay, Ivy finally stood. She walked to the laptop, leaned over, and pressed pause. The image froze on the moment. Tessa reached out and caught her sleeve. Ivy's fingers pressed against the edge of the touchpad, her knuckles pale blue-white. I told you. Marianne lifted her head to look at her. Ivy, I told you it wasn't her. Ivy's voice was low, but it did not scatter. I said it last night. I said it again today in the living room. Not one of you believed me. Marianne stood and tried to walk over. Ivy, Mom was only afraid you would get hurt again. Ivy stepped back. So you let Tessa get hurt. Marianne stopped walking. Richard looked at the screen, his throat moving. Why didn't Tessa just show us the video? Helen closed the laptop. She asked whether you wanted to see it. Richard's face stiffened. At the stairway, a housekeeper lowered her head, not daring to look at anyone. Owen had remained by the window the entire time. Only then did he slowly walk over. He placed the ring on the coffee table, bent down, picked up the laptop, and reopened the video. His finger dragged the clip to the second when he rushed into frame on the screen. His face was blurry, but his movement was painfully clear. He had not pushed aside an obstacle before saving Ivy. He had slammed into Tessa while she was saving someone. Owen's hand stayed on the touchpad for a long time without moving. Ivy looked at him. You didn't believe her either. Owen raised his head. Ivy, I thought. You thought she was trying to hurt me again. Ivy took the scarf from her shoulders. The white fabric hung from her hand. All of you did. Owen's throat seemed blocked by something. He looked at Ivy, then Marianne and Richard, and finally his gaze fell back to the ring. He had brought down the sticky note from the windowsill. It lay beneath the ring. The words on it were sharp and quiet. No one has to choose me forever. Starting tonight, that includes me. Marianne finally picked up her phone and called Tessa. It did not still nothing. Richard took out his phone and sent Tessa a message. Come home, we need to talk. There was no read receipt beside it. Owen suddenly turned and walked toward the door. Marianne lifted her head. Where are you going? Airport. Richard frowned. Owen, don't make this worse right now. Owen did not stop. Ivy grabbed the arm of the sofa and her voice came from behind him. Don't go. Owen stopped in the foyer. Ivy looked at his back. She doesn't want to see you right now. Owen's hand was already on the doorknob. Ivy added, not everyone who chases after someone deserves to be forgiven. Owen's fingers tightened. A few seconds later, he still pulled open the door and ran into the rain. When Maya received Owen's call, Tessa was about to board. The phone screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. Maya looked down, answered directly, and put it on speaker. Owen's voice came through with the sound of traffic behind it. Maya, where is she? Maya glanced at Tessa. Tessa handed her boarding pass to the gate agent. Maya said, Who is this? The other end paused. Don't play games. Give the phone to Tessa. Were you this polite when you slammed into her earlier? Owen's breathing grew heavier. I saw the video. Maya said nothing. Owen lowered his voice. I need to talk to her. Maya looked up at Tessa. Tessa took back her phone and held it to her ear. She did not speak. On the other end, Owen seemed not to expect that she would answer. He was quiet for 2 seconds. Tessa! Beside the gate, a child ran past with a small suitcase, its wheels rumbling over the floor. Owen said, I saw the video. Tessa looked at the line of people ahead. Yeah, why didn't you say anything? She put the boarding pass back in her bag. I did. On the other end, there was only the sound of wipers crossing the windshield. Tessa took 1 step forward. I said I did not push her. Owen did not answer right away. After a long time, he said, I was. Tessa cut him off. Owen, my flight is leaving. The sentence was so calm it sounded like she was only reminding him about a change in weather. Owen's voice finally lost its order. You can't just leave like this. Tessa lifted her eyes toward the end of the jet bridge, where the light was brighter and led to another plane, another city. I am already leaving. Tessa, wait until I get to the airport. Let us talk once, number Tessa. She stopped at the entrance to the jet bridge. We talked for 20 years in the last life. On the other end, Owen's breathing went light. Tessa kept walking. It did not change anything. She hung up and blocked the number. Maya walked beside her, took the phone, saw the blocked list screen, and nodded with satisfaction. Congratulations. Your phone's air quality just improved by 80%. Tessa entered the cabin and found her window seat. She put away her luggage and sat down. As she settled in, the wound on her palm pulled again. She did not look down. Outside the window, ground crew in raincoats moved across the tarmac, and the aircraft lights stretched long lines across the wet ground. Maya sat beside her and buckled her seatbelt. You really don't want to see how they are reacting right now. Tessa leaned against the seat back. Number Maya stared at her for 2 seconds. Sometimes you are cool in a deeply annoying way. Tessa closed her eyes. Thank you. As the plane began to taxi, the Whitmore house had descended into chaos. The anonymous account suddenly deleted its previous 2 posts. A few minutes later, it posted a new update. Correction pending. No body text. No apology. Only those 2 words. The comments exploded at once. What does that mean? Is this a reversal? Does anyone have the video? So Tessa really was framed. Helen's email quickly went out to school leadership. The school notified all related families, demanded that the spread of unverified information stop, and began tracing the submission source behind the anonymous account. Richard sat in his study, scrolling through screenshots on his phone as his face darkened by degrees. Marianne stood at the door of Tessa's room. The room was empty. Half the clothes were gone from the closet. Only a few pens remained on the desk. Rain had dampened the windowsill, and the ring had left one small circular mark. She walked in and opened a drawer. Several old ticket stubs were tucked inside. A debate final, a school paper awards ceremony, a movie. The corners of the stubs were slightly curled. On the back was Tessa's handwriting from when she was younger. Owen promised he'd come. Marianne held the ticket stub, her fingertips trembling. Soft footsteps sounded outside the door. Ivy stood there without makeup, holding her phone. Tessa's plane took off. Marianne lifted her head. Where is she going? Northlake. Ivy put her phone away. She didn't tell me. Maya sent it to me and said she boarded safely. Only then did Marianne's tears fall. Ivy, Mom didn't. Ivy looked down at the floor. Tessa was afraid of the dark when she was little too. Marianne froze. Ivy continued. On my first night home, she came to me with a pillow. She said if I had nightmares, I could knock on her wall. She raised her eyes. Every night after that, I wanted to knock, but I didn't dare. The ticket stub bent slightly in Marianne's hand. Evie spoke slowly. You always said she was strong. Does that mean she was never allowed to be scared? No one in the room answered. By the time Owen's car reached the airport, the plane had been in the air for 17 minutes. He rushed into the terminal, his shirt soaked through by the rain and his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked at the flight board. The Northlake line said departed. He stood in front of the screen, his phone still on the dialing page. Beside Tessa's number, there was only one cold prompt, unable to connect. He opened a text message and typed for a long time. I am sorry. 3 words appeared on the screen. He stared at them, his thumb hovering over send. In the end, a red exclamation mark appeared. Message not delivered. Owen stood frozen. Behind him, someone dragged a suitcase past. The wheels rolled by, then faded. He lowered his head and looked at the failed text. Suddenly, he remembered the hospital room in their last life, Tessa standing beside his bed with rain on her black coat. She had not cried then either. She had only said one word. Fine, an airport announcement rang out, covering every other sound in the terminal. Owen lifted his head and looked out through the glass. The clouds hung low. The plane was long gone. Several hours later, Tessa landed in the northern city. Dawn had not arrived yet, and the rain had stopped. The air outside the airport carried an unfamiliar cold. Maya pulled her jacket up to her chin and shivered. Congratulations. We have escaped the mansion and successfully arrived inside a refrigerator. Tessa dragged her suitcase to the taxi stand. Her phone buzzed. It was Ivy. I saw the video. I am sorry. A few seconds later, another message followed. And welcome to Northlake. Tessa looked at the screen and did not reply right away. Far away, the horizon had begun to turn gray-blue. A taxi stopped in front of them, and the driver got out to help with the luggage. Tessa got into the car, outside the window. Unfamiliar streets retreated inch by inch. At last, she typed, "Get proper treatment, send." Then she put the phone in her pocket and looked forward. The morning in the northern city did not roll out a red carpet for her, and no one raised a glass to congratulate her. There were only wet streets, half-open coffee shops, and a university that had not yet woken. When the car stopped outside the campus gate, the sky had lightened a little. Tessa dragged her suitcase out. Maya stood beside her, yawning, and pointed toward the academic buildings in the distance. "Miss Journalist, your new life office has arrived." Tessa looked at the building. The gauze on her palm stirred lightly in the wind. She did not look back. 1,000 miles away, Owen still stood in the airport terminal, discovering for the first time that someone really could leave so cleanly. Without even leaving him the shape of her back, Tessa's first article at Northlake crashed the school paper's server. The headline was short. Who gets believed? Below it were 3 video clips, 1 timeline, 2 email screenshots, and 1 anonymous submission record, so blurry it was almost impossible to identify a face. She did not write Owen's name. She did not write Ivy's diagnosis. She did not bring the Whitmore dinner table, her mother's tears, or her father's silence out for the public to stare at. She wrote about one thing only. A girl had been filmed reaching out to save someone, and the image had been cut into proof that she was the attacker. 10 minutes after the article went live, Maya rushed into the dorm with a laptop in her arms and nearly tripped over the rug by the door. The server is dead. Tessa was crouched on the floor assembling a bookshelf with a screw between her teeth. Maya turned the computer toward her. The page would not load, but the comments had exploded from social media all the way to the school forum. So the gossip account was cropping images to steer the narrative the whole time. She didn't push Ivy, she reached out. Owen Caldwell knocking her aside is so clear. Wait, Tessa never insulted anyone. She just released evidence. Maya's face lit with delight as she read. You know what the best part is? Tessa spat the screw into her palm. Maya, the best part is you didn't use one dirty word, and they are insulting everyone on your behalf with more technical skill than I have. Tessa picked up the screwdriver and continued assembling the shelf. Her phone screen lit up. Ivy had sent a message. I read the article. A few seconds later, thank you for not writing about my private stuff. Tessa looked at it for 2 seconds and replied with a short sentence. No period. That is your life, not my material. Ivy did not reply again. That night, the Bell Tower anonymous account was suspended by the school. The account had been run by 2 students, one who accepted submissions and one who edited the content. In the back-end records they handed over, One unknown email address had repeatedly provided photos from the Whitmore house. The email was not Ivy's. It was not Owen's either. 3 days later, Ivy sent Tessa a screenshot. The registered name on the email was Caleb Ross. Tessa sat in the school paper office and looked at the 3 words. The pen in her hand stopped moving. Maya leaned over. Who? Tessa turned her phone face down on the desk. Simone from Ivy's past. Maya's expression immediately sobered. Tessa did not open the screenshot again. She opened her computer and began drafting interview questions for the next piece. She asked the Student Support Center for permission to conduct anonymous interviews, checked the school's process for handling online harassment, and called Helen. When the call connected, Helen's side was very quiet. Chessa, are you sure you want to look into this? Chessa looked out the window. Across campus, someone ran past with books hugged to their chest, their scarf streaming in the wind. I am sure. This will involve your family. Chessa wrote the first question on the page. It already has. That article did not become a messy sequel about the Whitmore family. It became an investigation into anonymous campus accounts, image editing, and the secondary harm done to victims. Tessa interviewed 7 people, reviewed disciplinary records from 3 schools, and laid out how anonymous submissions could be packaged as leaks without verification. The day the article went live, a professor from Northlake School of Journalism called her into his office. The professor wore thin-framed glasses. He placed the printed draft on his desk, marked heavily in red pen. Tessa stood in front of the desk, her fingers lightly pressing the strap of her bag. The professor adjusted his glasses. You have a bad habit. Tessa lifted her eyes. What habit? You sharpen the knife too brightly. When Maya heard that later, she laughed until she fell back onto her dorm bed. Was that criticism or praise? Tessa set her book on the desk. I don't know. I do. Maya crawled up from the bed and picked up a pen as if it were a microphone. Breaking news. Local woman weaponizes footnotes. Tessa threw a pillow at her. Life did not become light the moment she left the Whitmore house. She still woke at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling of the unfamiliar dorm, reaching toward the bedside table and finding no silver bracelet where one had rested for years. She still heard someone in the dining hall call the name Ivy and found her fingers pausing on her coffee cup. She still saw her reflection in the glass doors of the journalism building and suddenly remembered the projection screen at the Eastbridge dinner. But she did not go back. Every day she went to class, conducted interviews, edited drafts, and split half of a terrible vending machine sandwich with Maya. She filled the dorm bookshelf, sorted the old archives in the school paper office by year, and backed up every interview recording 3 times. When the first snow of December fell, Ivy came to Northlake. She did not give much advance warning. She only sent one message. I arrive tomorrow. Can I see you for 10 minutes? Tessa looked at that message until the screen went dark, then lit it again in the end, she replied. Coffee shop by the campus gate, 3 p.m. The next afternoon, Ivy sat by the window with a cup of barely touched hot tea in front of her. She had lost weight. Her hair was cut to her shoulders. There were no pearls around her neck. The white scarf was wrapped around her, clean from washing. Tessa pushed the door open, and the bell chimed once. Ivy immediately stood. A small round table stood between them. Neither of them hugged. Ivy's fingers hooked around the mug handle. I started regular therapy. Tessa pulled out a chair and sat. Good. The doctor says I need to stay away from home for a while. Tessa picked up the menu and ordered a black coffee. Ivy lowered her head, her voice very soft. I applied to the community arts program here. It is not a full university program, just a few classes for now. The server placed the coffee in front of Tessa. Tessa added a little milk. No sugar photography. Ivy looked up, a small light appearing in her eyes. How did you know? You used to look at windows all the time. Ivy paused. Tessa stirred her coffee. At the light, the spoon touched the side of the cup with a quiet clink. Ivy's eyes slowly reddened. She lowered her head and took a sip of tea, burned the tip of her tongue, immediately frowned, and put the cup down in embarrassment. Tessa pushed a napkin toward her. Ivy took it. I sent Eastbridge a formal email declining the recommendation. Tessa said nothing. They can remove the name Ivy Whitmore from the list. Ivy looked up at Tessa. I did not come to give it back to you. I know you don't want it anymore either. Outside the window, students walked through the snow, their shoes pressing deep and shallow prints into the white. Ivy took an old envelope from her bag and pushed it toward Tessa. I wrote this to you a long time ago. I never sent it. Tessa did not touch it. Ivy pulled the envelope back and placed it beside her cup. You don't have to read it. Tessa looked at her hands. They were steadier than Tessa remembered from the last life. When the coffee was almost finished, Ivy suddenly asked, Has Owen been to your place? Tessa lifted her eyes. Ivy pinched the edge of the scarf. He went looking for you several times. Tessa set down her cup. I didn't see him. I know. Ivy nodded gently. He said he just wanted to apologize. Tessa picked up her coat. He can write in a diary. Ivy froze for half a second. Tessa had already stood. 10 minutes are up. Ivy stood too, a little flustered. Her knee hit the table corner and tea sloshed from the cup. Tessa pulled several napkins free and pressed them against the spill. Ivy looked at her hand. Tessa, yay? Do you hate me? The coffee shop was warm and white fog covered the glass. Tessa tossed the wet napkins into the trash. I did. Ivy's lashes trembled. Tessa zipped up her coat. Then I got busy. Ivy lowered her head and laughed once, and tears fell with it. Tessa did not hand her a tissue. Ivy wiped them herself. After that day, Ivy stayed in North Lake. They did not suddenly become close sisters. They met once a month. Sometimes they had coffee, sometimes a simple dinner. Ivy sent Tessa the photos she took: snow by the window, light on old stairs, an umbrella forgotten in the corner coffee shop. Tessa replied occasionally. The composition is crooked. The next day, Ivy sent a new one. What about this one? Tessa looked at it for half a minute. Better. When Maya saw the chat record, she clutched her chest and collapsed onto the couch. Sisterly love. Earth-shaking. One better from you carries enough value to qualify for a loan. Tessa ignored her. 3 years later, Tessa's name appeared on the shortlist for a National Young Journalist Award for the first time. Her investigative series was called The Children No One Checked On. It covered children's records the system had missed, missing person reports, and ignored cries for help. She never wrote Ivy's name, but she illuminated the edge of the darkness Ivy had once walked through. The awards ceremony was held in an old theater in a northern city. Tessa wore a deep green gown, her hair pinned up, and no bracelet on her wrist. Maya sat on her left in a suit, with a tiny cat pin at her collar. Ivy sat on her right with a camera in her hands, and the lens cap still on. Maya whispered a reminder. Ivy the cap. Ivy hurriedly removed the lens cap. Tessa glanced at her. Ivy lifted the camera and gave her a small smile. When the host read Tessa's name, the theater lights fell over her. Tessa rose, the hem of her gown brushing the edge of the seat. She walked onto the stage and accepted the trophy. The metal base was cool in her hands. Applause rose below the stage. She stood at the microphone and did not open the prepared speech. Thank you to my editor, and thank you to every person who trusted me with their story during the reporting process. She paused. Her gaze moved across the audience. Ivy's camera was aimed at her, and her eyes were fiercely red. Beside her, Maya mouthed, "Don't cry, makeup is expensive." Tessa looked away. A lot of people think the truth will walk out on its own. It won't. Sometimes it is locked on a hard drive. Sometimes the 10 seconds before and after it have been cut away. Sometimes it sits in an archive box no one has opened. She held the trophy. So someone has to go look for it. Applause rose again in the shadows of the theater's second floor. Owen Caldwell stood in the last row. He was much thinner than before. The shoulders of his suit hung a little loose, and there was blue-gray fatigue beneath his eyes. He did not sit. He stood near the exit, like someone unsure whether he had the right to come inside. After the ceremony, Tessa saw him in the backstage corridor. He stood by a vending machine, holding a bottle of water whose cap had already been twisted out of shape. When he saw her come out, he immediately straightened. Tessa. Maya had been about to walk over, but Ivy caught her arm. Tessa can handle it herself. Maya looked at Ivy and for the first time did not argue. Tessa stopped 3 steps from Owen. People moved back and forth in the corridor, winners, reporters, staff, the sound of leather shoes mixed with laughter. Owen looked at her. The plastic bottle crackled faintly in his hand. "Congratulations. Thank you." He opened his mouth. "I read your reporting, every piece." Tessa did not respond. Owen's gaze fell to her wrist, empty and bare. "I owe you a lot of apologies." Tessa glanced at her watch. "You can say one." Owen's throat moved. "I am sorry." The 3 words fell into the hallway and did not echo. Tessa nodded. "I heard you." She was ready to leave. Owen took 1 step forward, then stopped. "I have dreamed about that pond for years." Tessa lifted her eyes to him. Owen's eyes were red. "I dream that I rush over and knock you away. I dream of you standing in the rain, looking at the camera. I dream of the hospital room in our last life, when you said fine." He lowered his head and laughed once, very softly, though his face was pale. "I can never tell which time it is." Tessa did not answer. Owen set the water bottle on the nearby table. When his fingers released it, the bottle slowly sprang back into shape. "I went to Eastbridge. Later, I withdrew. Ivy never went either. None of us went," Tessa said. "I know." Owen looked at her. "You know." Tessa Whitmore is a journalist. She looked at him, her tone even. "She checks." Something old rose in Owen's eyes. The same late panic from the wedding in their last life. The hospital room. The doorway on application night. "Then you know I know." He had later taken a leave from school. Later, he had gone to therapy. Later, he had left the core business of the Caldwell family. Occasionally, someone photographed him in airports, hotels, or late-night convenience stores. Sometimes he looked clear-eyed, sometimes silent. Sometimes he stared for a long time at the back of an unfamiliar woman. All of it had passed through Tessa's news feeds, and all of it had been deleted by her. Owen said quietly, "I did not come to ask you to turn back." Tessa looked at him and did not expose the polite lie. Owen's hand hung at his side, his fingertips trembling slightly. "I just wanted to know if I had not knocked you away that day." "There is no if." Tessa's voice was not loud, but it was clear enough for him to hear. At the other end of the corridor, Ivy lifted her camera, then slowly lowered it again. Tessa continued. "That day, there was a video. In the last life, there wasn't. The only difference is that this time, someone saw." Owen's face slowly turned gray. She stepped around him and walked toward the exit. After a few steps, Owen called her from behind. "Tessa?" She did not look back. "I really did love you." Tessa stopped for 1 second. The side door of the theater opened, and cold wind rushed in, stirring the hem of her gown. "I know." She pushed the door open and went outside. Fine. Maya had already called a car and was standing by the curb, hopping in place to keep warm. Ivy stood beside her, holding her camera with her scarf, covering half her face. When Maya saw Tessa, she immediately opened the car door. "Get in, Miss Journalist. Our restaurant only holds the table for 20 minutes, and if we are late, we lose the celebration dinner," Ivy said softly. "I ordered a cake." Maya turned to look at her. "You hid that from me." Ivy tugged the scarf higher. "Tessa doesn't like things too sweet. I ordered it with less sugar." Tessa got into the car. Maya sat in the passenger seat and turned back to look at them. Here is the question. After an award speech, is the award winner allowed to look slightly happy in the car? Tessa placed the trophy on her lap. Ivy's camera gave a soft click. Tessa looked at her. Ivy lowered the camera. "This one is good," Tessa said. "Let me see." Ivy handed her the camera in the photo. Tessa sat beside the car window. Snow and theater lights rested on her shoulders. She was not smiling clearly, only the corners of her mouth had softened. Her hand rested on the trophy, her knuckles clean, her wrist bare. Tessa looked at it for a long time. The composition is still crooked. Ivy lowered her head to look at the photo and whispered, "I don't think it is." Maya slapped the back of the front seat. The sisters' conflict has upgraded from men to composition. This is civilization advancing. The car was quiet for 1 second. Then Ivy laughed first. Maya laughed with her. Tessa looked out the window, and the corner of her mouth moved too. As the car passed the theater entrance, Owen still stood on the steps. Snow landed on his shoulders and quickly melted into water. He did not chase after them. He only watched the car merge into the street, its taillights shrinking to 2 red dots before the night swallowed them. Tessa did not look in the rearview mirror. The car window reflected her face, and Ivy's beside it. 2 faces that did not look alike, one bright, one shadowed, not close together, but finally appearing quietly side by side in the same pane of glass. Many years ago, the Whitmore family lost one daughter and misplaced the other. Many years later, the sisters did not repair the old house. They simply walked out separately, and in another city, learned again how to sit at the same table. At the restaurant entrance, Maya jumped out first. "Come on tonight. Whoever mentions Owen pays the bill." Ivy got out with her camera in her arms and asked seriously, "What if someone mentions him twice?" "Then Maya will make you buy the whole restaurant," Tessa said. Ivy paused, then smiled until her eyes curved. Tessa picked up the trophy and followed them into the light. Her phone buzzed in her bag. She did not check it immediately. The restaurant door opened, and warmth, the scent of cream, the clink of tableware, and the low laughter of a crowd all rushed out together. Maya was already waving from inside. Ivy turned back and waited for her. Before Tessa went in, she lowered her head and glanced at her phone. It was a new email. Northlake University School of Journalism. Subject, guest lecture invitation. The first line read, "We would be honored to invite alumna Tessa Whitmore to speak to this year's incoming journalism students." Tessa finished reading and put the phone back in her bag. Ivy asked, "Good news?" Tessa pushed open the door. "Yeah, what kind of good news?" Tessa walked into the restaurant. "They want me to come back and talk about how to find the real beginning of a story." Maya lifted her water glass at the table. then you have to tell them that sometimes the beginning is where everyone thinks the heroine has lost. Ivy added, but really, she just changed destinations. Tessa sat down and placed the trophy on the empty chair beside her. The server brought out the cake. There were no over-the-top decorations on the white cream, only one small line of writing, to Tessa, who found her own way. Tessa looked at the words and picked up the fork. No one cut the cake for her anymore. No one told her who she should give her piece to. She cut the first slice herself and set it on a plate. Outside the window, snow was still falling, and the theater lights were slowly receding. The names from old days stayed on the blocked list. The keys to the old house stayed in the back of a drawer. The old ring remained in Owen's hands, and the old bracelet had been tucked into a box by someone she no longer needed to know. Tessa lowered her head and tasted the cake. Less sugar, perfect. This story appears to be about two sisters. It is not. It is about what happens when a family decides which child is allowed to be fragile. The moment Ivy Whitmore returned, traumatized, thin, afraid of water and darkness, the Whitmore household reorganized itself around her wound. The menu changed, the photographs changed, the piano fell silent. The birthday dinners went bland. Every surface was sanded down to protect the girl who had suffered, and no one noticed that the sanding was being done with pieces of Tessa. That is the particular cruelty of this story. No one stole from Tessa with malice. They stole from her with tenderness, tenderness aimed at someone else. Marianne didn't cancel Tessa's graduation party because she hated her daughter. She canceled it because Ivy was afraid of crowds. And in Marianne's hierarchy of pain, the frightened child always outranked the disappointed one. But disappointment, administered daily for years, becomes its own kind of wound. It simply doesn't look dramatic enough to earn treatment. Owen Caldwell is the embodiment of this hierarchy. He is not a villain. He is something more dangerous, a man who genuinely believes he is good. He runs into the garden to save Ivy and slams Tessa into a shattered flower pot without registering the impact. He deletes her college application and calls it protection. He tells her she already has everything, while systematically ensuring she has nothing. No school of her choice, no evening, uninterrupted, no boyfriend whose first instinct isn't to shield someone else. And when Tessa bleeds, he doesn't see it, not because the blood is hidden, but because he has trained himself to look past her toward the person he has decided needs him more. That is what makes the security footage so devastating, not because it proves Tessa's innocence, but because it proves what everyone already knew and chose not to see. She was reaching out. She was saving Ivy. And the man who claimed to love her knocked her aside because he could not imagine a world in which Tessa was the one doing the rescuing. His apology, years later, is honest. But honesty delivered after the flight has departed is just a man talking to an empty terminal. The true revelation of this story belongs to Ivy. In a lesser narrative, Ivy would be the antagonist, the returned sister who consumed all the oxygen. But Ivy never asked for the throne. She told Helen she didn't want the Eastbridge recommendation. She told her family Tessa didn't push her. She stood on the staircase and said, "Let her go." Every time the family tried to use Ivy as a weapon against Tessa, Ivy refused to be held. She simply wasn't strong enough yet to be heard. The coffee shop scene, two sisters, a round table, 10 minutes, no hug, is the most honest reconciliation I have ever witnessed in these stories. They do not fall into each other's arms. They do not cry and promise to start over. Ivy burns her tongue on hot tea. Tessa pushes a napkin across the table. That is it. That is everything. Because rebuilding a sisterhood doesn't require grand gestures. It requires showing up month after month with crooked photographs and cake, ordered with less sugar. And then there is the composition. Ivy sends photos. Tessa says, crooked. Ivy sends another. Tessa says, better. This is not criticism. It is the architecture of trust being rebuilt, one honest word at a time. It is two women learning that love does not require agreement, only presence, the final image. Two faces reflected side by side in a car window, not alike, not close, but finally appearing in the same frame is the image the Whitmore family, because at that table, one daughter was always the centerpiece, and the other was always the empty chair. Tessa did not win by defeating anyone. She won by leaving a house that could only hold one daughter's pain at a time and building a life spacious enough to hold her own. The cake at the end reads, to Tessa, who found her own way, less sugar, perfect. So here's my question, ladies. How many of you were the strong one, the daughter, the sister, the friend who never got the soft voice because everyone assumed you didn't need it? How long did you rearrange your life around someone else's fragility before you realized your own silence had become a wound no one thought to dress? And when you finally walked out, not in anger, but in clarity, did they call it leaving or did they call it betrayal? What did your life taste like when you finally cut your own slice? I'll be in the comments.